When you hear the name Disney, what do you think of? I bet it's magic, dreams, happily ever afters, all that good stuff, right? But what if I told you that just beneath the sparkling surface of that kingdom, there's a much more complex and, yeah, often a much darker story? Well, today, we're going to peel back that curtain and explore the unsettling realities hidden inside the Disney empire.
See, we're going to dive into this wild contrast between the perfect image Disney works so hard to create and the kind of unsettling truths hidden in its history. From the seriously grim origins of its famous fairy tales to the strange secrets of its theme parks and even the pressures inside the corporation itself, we're going to see what really lies behind all that magic.
So let's start where it all began, the stories themselves. You see, a ton of Disney's most beloved classics are based on these really old folktales. And these weren't your cozy bedtime stories. Nope, they were often brutal, cautionary tales meant for a much, much harsher world. And that's where Disney's genius came in. They cleaned them up, turning terrifying nightmares into box office gold.
Okay, let's take Cinderella. In the Disney movie, she gets the prince, the castle, the perfect ending. But in the original Brothers Grimm story, oh, it gets shockingly bloody. The stepsisters are so desperate to fit into that slipper that on their mother's advice, one actually cuts off her own toe, and the other slices off part of her heel. Of course, it doesn't work, all the blood gives them away. And their punishment? At Cinderella's wedding, her little bird friends fly down and just peck out both of their eyes. Yeah.
Ariel's story might just be the most heartbreaking rewrite of them all. In Hans Christian Andersen's original tale, getting legs comes with this agonizing price. Every single step feels like she's walking on daggers, just pure agony. And to make it all worse, the prince she did it for, he kind of treats her like a cute pet and ends up marrying a human princess. Ariel is then given a terrible choice. Kill the prince and she can live, or she dies. She can't bring herself to do it, so she throws herself into the ocean and dissolves into sea foam. No happy ending there.
And Snow White? You can forget true love's kiss. In the Grimm version, she's revived when a clumsy servant trips while carrying her glass coffin. The jolt dislodges the piece of poisoned apple from her throat. It's a total accident, not romance. And the cruelty doesn't end there. As punishment, the evil queen is dragged to Snow White's wedding, where she's forced to put on a pair of red-hot iron shoes and literally dance until she drops dead. Seriously. But this kind of darkness isn't just stuck on the pages of old books. It seeps into the real world too. Specifically, into the theme parks that are famously marketed as the happiest place on Earth. But as we're about to find out, they've got their own share of strange legends, bizarre truths, and some really tragic stories.
So, are they the happiest place on Earth? Let's take a look at some of the things you definitely won't see in the official brochures, from the kind of quirky and surprising to the genuinely disturbing.
All right, let's start with something kind of weird but absolutely true. Ever since 1955, the Disney parks have had, let's say, a rodent issue. And their solution? A managed colony of over 200 feral cats. I'm not kidding. They're all taken care of, spayed and neutered, and then at night they're let out to become this elite, purring pest control team. Most people who visit have no idea they're even there.
And then you've got the legends. Did you know that it's so common for people to try and scatter the ashes of their loved ones on rides like the Haunted Mansion that Disney actually has a special code and cleanup protocol for it? Or what about George, the supposed ghost of a construction worker who haunts the Pirates of the Caribbean ride? They say the ride will break down if the staff doesn't say, "Good morning, George," to him. And of course, there's that persistent urban legend that no one is ever officially pronounced dead on Disney property, all to protect that perfect image. But, it's not all ghost stories and quirky legends. There are real, devastating tragedies. Back in 2016, a beloved employee named Javier Cruz, who was performing as Pluto, was tragically killed during a parade at the Magic Kingdom after getting caught between two floats. It's a really sobering reminder that even in the most magical places, real-world dangers are never far away.
And that brings us to our final stop. We're going to look behind the scenes at the corporation itself. We're talking everything from myths about its legendary founder to the troubling patterns that have shown up among some of its biggest young stars.
So you've almost certainly heard the one about Walt Disney's body being cryogenically frozen, right? Well, that's completely false. He was actually cremated back in 1966. But there is a strange and kind of touching tribute. A single lamp is kept lit 24/7 in the window of his old private apartment above the fire station in Disneyland. And for decades, employees have sworn they sometimes see it flicker
or even turn itself on and off when no one's in there.
Then there's the phenomenon people call the Disney curse. It's a pattern we've unfortunately seen play out again and again. A young, super talented star gets shot into the stratosphere by the Disney machine, becomes a global superstar, and then they face these intense, very public struggles later on. You know the names: Lindsay Lohan, Demi Lovato, Miley Cyrus. They all followed this incredibly difficult path, and it raises some really serious questions about the crushing pressure put on these kids.
So, what does this all add up to? How do we even begin to reconcile the magical image we all know and love with these much darker, more complicated truths? Well, the story of Disney is, at its heart, anything but simple.
You know, the common thread here really seems to be this relentless, almost obsessive pursuit of perfection. The exact same impulse that scrubs the blood and guts from a fairy tale also creates this unbelievably high-pressure world for its stars and its park employees, a world that's led to lawsuits and harsh criticism, some of it even coming from inside the Disney family itself.
And maybe the most poignant connection of all comes back to Walt himself. Have you ever noticed just how many Disney heroes are orphans? Bambi, Cinderella, Snow White. The list just goes on and on. Well, back in the late 30s, right after Snow White became a massive hit, Walt bought his parents a new house. Tragically, a faulty furnace led to a gas leak that killed his mother. He carried the guilt of that with him for the rest of his life, a profound personal tragedy that he may have unconsciously poured into so many of his most iconic films.
So what you start to see is that Disney's magic has always existed right alongside a darker, more complex reality. The cleaned-up stories, the urban legends in the parks, the corporate pressures, they're all part of the same kingdom. So the real question is, does knowing all of this ruin the magic, or does it just make the story of this global empire that much more fascinating?